And so, once upon a time, because many stories should carry on like that, there lived a king. This king was, quite unsurprisingly, the richest man in his kingdom. What is a little more surprising, however, is that this king was also the loneliest, most hungry, most exhausted man in his kingdom too. He had hardly slept in years, because he had once heard his ministers talking about him, with some of them agreeing that they should kill him in his sleep. He had stopped eating because he had heard a rumour his chef was trying to poison him, and he became very thin, until it occurred to him to just cook for himself. This saved a bit of money, but annoyed the chef, who had to find alternative employment, and told all his chef friends, which then made the king very afraid to eat food anywhere in his lands that he had not prepared entirely himself. But it all became too much, however, when someone really did try to kill him, which deeply upset the king, as he'd always tried to be a good man. An irate farmer had attempted to bludgeon him with an oversized parsnip, because since all the chefs in the kingdom had moved to other lands in search of work, the farmer and all his farmer friends had lost a lucrative market for their vegetables. As the man charged after him, the king called out to his personal guards for help, but they all seemed to curiously develop sinusitis, and as a result couldn't run fast enough after the attacker. Eventually the king was able to ward the man off by wielding a vegetable peeler and promising to buy all the farmer's harvest for that year, though there was no way he could eat that many marrows and butternut squashes. They were aubergines as well, but the king had never liked those. This made the king all the more depressed. He began to regret his former selflessness. In fact, he began to resent it. So one day, the king went out to the forest at the edge of his kingdom, looking for an old abandoned bungalow and a bad fairy he'd met there years ago. He left his palace disguised as an old woman in case anyone should recognize him and try to kill him again. He soon found his old house, surprised at how easily he remembered the way after all these years. As he approached the front door, he beamed with relief as he saw a fairy perched upon his doorstep, eating a sandwich and reading a book. "There you are," the king rejoiced. The fairy looked up at the poorly disguised king, and with a quick nod revealed that he was perfectly okay with transvesticism. But the king's heart sank as he realised it wasn't the same fairy. This one had a small pointy beard, and a wand that wasn't shaped like anything rude. In fact, it seemed to be shaped like an aubergine. This again made the king's heart sink deeper into his weary bones. "Is there something you want?" this other fairy asked, inexplicably with a lisp. "Oh, I'm sorry," said the king. "I was looking for someone. I thought you were him, but you're not." "Who was it you were searching for?" the fairy asked, putting his book down. The king noticed it was a Jackie Collins novel and frowned. "Someone I met here years ago. A fairy who granted me half a wish that I want to reverse." Again. "Oh, I think I know who that is. I can't speak his name, of course, but I'm afraid he's not here. He's on holiday, and you'll have to wait 2 weeks for him to come back." "Where's he gone?" "Somewhere super in Spain with lots of sunshine by the sea. I'll tell him you were looking for him, though." The king said it was very important, but the other fairy apologised, saying there was nothing he could do. The king asked the fairy if he could help him reverse his half-wish, but the fairy just glared at him angrily and went back to reading his Jackie Collins novel and eating his sandwich. The king thought it was best to leave it and returned to his palace to wait. By the time he returned to his room, he found someone had poured custard in his bed. He asked his maids to wash the sheets, but they said his bed had always been like that, so Furciel had to clean his sheets himself, which is very demeaning for a king. Over the next 2 weeks, the key to his wardrobe went missing on the same day the washing machine inexplicably broke, so he had only the one pair of clothes, which soon began to smell. And he broke his lucky garlic crusher. Even the woman with her magical performing existential puppet show began to feature a character called King Stinky Stupid, who had smelly feet. Everyone else in the court seemed to laugh much louder at this character, which made the king feel somewhat dejected, and he asked the woman to stop coming, which made everyone all the more annoyed with him and the king feel more isolated. Finally, his patience paid off. One night, when he returned to his cold, empty room, he found his old friend, the bad fairy, perched insouciantly upon his windowsill. "How did you find me?" the king explained. "Facebook," the fairy replied. "Really?" "No, I heard you wanted to see me." "I do," the king said. "You have to help me. This is getting out of hand. People are talking about me, saying horrible things. They made me wear clothes that smell, and I think someone broke my lucky garlic crusher because my chef was trying to poison me, and someone tried to kill me with a vegetable, and on top of it all, I think I have athlete's foot. I need your help." The bad fairy said he didn't do feet, and recommended a reputable chiropodist. The king said he wasn't talking about his feet, but about his wish. He said he knew now that he was wrong, that the world is meant to be balanced, that there is meant to be evil as well as good amongst all men and women. The responsibility for the world's ills was too much for him to bear. He'd been a fool thinking he'd do it. The king begged the bad fairy to take his last wish back. The bad fairy said that was all very well and good, but there was nothing he could do. It was only half a wish, and he had no power to break it. At this, the king despaired and fell to his feet, weeping uncontrollably at his fate, like other grown men do when their football team loses a cup final. "Oh, hang on, I've just remembered something," the fairy muttered absently, scratching his back with his rudely shaped wand. The king looked up and stared at the fairy, though he didn't see the wand because it was behind the fairy's back. "There is one way, the only way, in fact, to break the wish and reverse your fate again."
The only way to surrender all your wealth and to live again the humble life of an unhated man is to find the greatest treasure of all, that which cannot be bought by the sum of all your treasures."
The king asked if this was the purest gold in the world. The bad fairy said no. The king asked if this was the largest diamond. Again, the bad fairy said no. The king asked if it was an iPhone. The bad fairy asked what an iPhone was, and decided to get one of these for himself once the king had told him, but said that this was not it either. "Well, what is it then?" the king asked.
"Love," said the bad fairy.
"Love?" the king asked.
"Yes,"
replied the bad fairy.
"If you can fall in love with a person, and that person falls in love with you, the spell will be reversed, and you will again become a normal man."
"But that's easy," the king said. "Surely I can find someone to love me."
"Perhaps you will, perhaps you won't," said the bad fairy. "But you cannot tell anyone of the wishes I have given you, or your luck will fall even further from you. And still more importantly, remember that if you do find the greatest treasure of all, you will return evil to the world. People will fight each other and die. People will feel hate towards one another, their neighbours, fathers and sons, and this will all happen because of you."
But the king was so fed up with people trying to kill him that he no longer cared. He didn't want to be king anymore.